Good morning, everybody. How are we? Happy Monday. It is the start of our week. Um, we are here to talk about astrology. We're here to run some charts. We have 5 more charts in the queue, ready to dissect, ready to kind of share everybody's um, thoughts and feelings in regards to natal stuff and talk about the stars and what the stars mean and the signs and all that jazz. Just as a reminder for everybody who's watching the recording of this or the live stream of this, if you would like to submit your chart to the live stream, all you need to do is private message me your birth date, birthplace, and exact birth time, and I will add you to the list. The list is rather long, so please be patient, but I will message you when your chart is featured. And likewise, if you enjoy the way that I read and the live streams and you'd like to support my work, you can always learn astrology from me. You can go to scorpiorisingastrology.com, my website. I have lots of online classes where you can learn the basics of astrology, advanced medical astrology stuff, fun things, as well as schedule private consults to work one-on-one kind of deeper with your chart. So enough about me. Let's talk about the charts in the queue. Which I have saved but not pulled up because why would I do things the right way this morning? Okay, so we're looking at live stream charts and we're looking at October 19th. Here we go. Okay, so let's talk about L, which totally gives me flashbacks to Death Note. If you've read that manga, not the bastardized Netflix movie, no, the original anime and manga. Anyway, cheers. Good morning, L, my darling. Let's take a peek at your chart. If you'd like to look at the actual chart, you can find me on Facebook, or the recording will be on YouTube, which will actually show the image of the chart as well. Leo ascendant, that's where you get your flair for the dramatic. Sun is in the 12th. That's sticky. Sticky. Nice Libra moon to balance it out. Okay. Saturn in Gemini, breaking that up. That's good. Neptune and Uranus in Aquarius. Okay. Already. Oh, Venus in Virgo. Goodness. All right. So let's go ahead. Let's kind of take this chart one step at a time. So first and foremost, we're looking at a Leo ascendant. So this is where we get our flair for the dramatic. This is where we get that kind of bright inner light that Leo is known to have as that fixed fire sign. You know, when we think about fixed fire, I always have this really beautiful image of a hearth in mind. The fire that does not go out. It's the perpetual flame, and that's what we're talking about with Leo. And to have a Leo ascendant means that you've been stamped by that fixed fire energy, and that brightness is innervated in your life. Not just that, but we also have Mars and Leo here in the first house, which does bring in an added kind of heat bonus. So double down on heat stuff. Now, Mars is an interesting planet to put in the first house, because especially in early life, when that Mars is not channeled appropriately, it can manifest as angry outbursts, it can manifest as temper tantrums, it can manifest as really strong leadership qualities, potentially on the aggressive side, a lot of energy, too much energy, must run, must go, must do. And that fire burning just a little bit out of control until maturity starts to hit the chart and that Mars starts to get tempered by that Leo and really starts to become that really nice roaring flame, as opposed to that kind of spitfire that Mars really enjoys. Also, from a medical astrology perspective, we need to be aware that Mars brings heat and inflammation into any body sign that is in the first house. So when we have Mars and Leo in the first house, that's going to bring an extra added kind of inflammatory tendency to the Leo body systems, which are going to be the heart. So anything like arrhythmia, chest pain, things like that, as well as the spine. Yeah, so back pain in general, and the spine, heart, eyes, eye pain, and stuff like that. So yeah, that's where we're gonna Gonna go with that. Let's see. Then now we need to address this not okay kind of grouping of Mercury in Cancer, Sun in Cancer, Jupiter Cancer in the 12th house. So the ruler of your chart, because you have Leo on the ascendant, is the Sun. The Sun is in Cancer in the 12th house, one sign away from his natural rulership of Leo, so it's a strong Sun. But the Sun itself is in the 12th house of hidden enemies, and this is a pretty nasty house to put the Sun. Whenever I see a chart with the Sun in the 12th, it's kind of like taking, excuse me, it's kind of like taking the bright light of our solar system and putting it in the darkest space and locking it away in that trunk in the basement. The 12th house is the house that we go to for karmic healing. It's the house that we go to for retreat and repair. But it's also a house that's known for jails, hospitalizations, intense physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual cooking. And to put the Sun here, it often, especially earlier in life, will breed a terrible, terrible self-confidence issue, very low self-esteem. And especially with the Sun being in Cancer, who's already prone to being an overgiver, over-nurturer, somebody who tends to, when expressed negatively, smother in order to show affection, as opposed to showing true unconditional love, which only comes later in life with maturity. That sun in the 12th can be a little bit problematic early on in life, because it's this idea of, I have so much to give, but I also don't believe in myself. You know, it's that juxtaposition of, I feel the need to help and to serve and to be a light to others, but I am also falling apart at the seams and I don't know what life is. And that kind of push-pull give-take is so difficult to master earlier in life. It really does get better. As that Sun matures, as the Leo placements mature, as that Mars starts to take control in the first house, a matured Mars is a force to be reckoned with. That's the general that has gone through basic training and has now understood that there is strategy to battle, as opposed to just rushing in and killing everything within, a 7-mile radius. And so we have a channeled amount of power that is able to turn the 12th house from a victim house to a, it's the idea of like 12th house being jails and hospitalizations. Instead of being an inmate, instead of being a patient, you are now the doctor, you are now the jailer, or the counselor or the lawyer that's able to kind of step into those toxic situations, step into those dark night of the soul moments, and use that Sun to shed light. Yeah. A lot of 12th house placements, when we see a lot of activity happening here, these are people who make great counselors. These are people who really are able to take people's trauma and transmute them effectively. And you also have Mercury here and Jupiter here, which are very good with words. It really strengthens the mind in this space. I would highly suggest you study psychology, if not just for yourself, for the people that you'll kind of encounter down the road as you start to kind of play Dorothy and meet the Cowardly Lion and the Tin Man and all the other characters along your journey, and the Scarecrow. Like, it's going to be one of those things where you're going to need a certain level of self-development in your life regardless, not just for your own sake, but also because you will constantly be surrounded by people who need your help. And you'll be uniquely qualified to give it to them. But it's just something that you'll be, it would serve you well to study the intricacies of how people become broken. Self-image is also like really sticky in this chart for a couple reasons. One of them is that Sun. The second is this Venus in Virgo. So Venus, goddess of abundance, lady of all that is beautiful and curvaceous and thick and rich and delicious. She is in her detriment of Virgo, actually where she is right now in the skies. So you just had your Venus return. but she's in the second house of wealth. And when we say wealth, we mean physical wealth, but we also mean internal wealth. Um, and to have Venus, who is naturally a very abundant planet, in a very restrictive and kind of anal retentive sign of Virgo, which is her detriment, her least favorite sign, that can also compromise self worth. And that can also really shed a harsh light on not just financial matters, but also the idea of what are you worth? And how does money come into that equation? And can you actually save enough to restore your self esteem? Yeah. Will you ever be enough by having enough? Ooh, that's delicious. Will you ever be enough by having enough? Damn, that's a good nugget. Somebody write that down. Um, that's going in the book. So that's fun. Uh, One of the ways that you'll actually discover your sense of self-value and potentially get a good amount of money is through the third house of writing, teaching, and communication. So whatever you choose to do professionally, I would highly encourage you to start understanding that you're working your way towards a teaching position. And that being a very important aspect for your chart. Because we have the moon in the third house, you'll find a lot of emotional fulfillment in the third house of writing, teaching, communication. But because that moon is being ruled by Venus in the second of wealth, there's also a good chance that you'll discover some hidden financial resources that would otherwise not have been accessible to you until you started writing, teaching, speaking. And likewise, you'll also start to heal some of those self-image issues by being a little bit more vocal, a little bit upfront, and sharing what you know with others. Children will be a little bit difficult. Um, I don't like the formation of your children house. The fifth house of children has Pluto, which is naturally pretty toxic until halfway through the life, and the South Node, which is the major energy suck of the chart. Jupiter is also ruling the fifth house of children from the 12th house of hospitalizations, which is dangerous. So if you do pursue the route of children, I would highly recommend that you have a more rigorous medical appointment schedule than most, and also pay very, very close attention because Sagittarius is also on your fifth house, which could potentially lead to rupture of blood vessels if not taken care of properly. That diet, especially diet that is very heavy and healthy for the liver and the liver health because of Sagittarius, that's going to be very, very important. Um, yeah, totally. I think that would be super fun. Just make sure that again, as you start to develop professionally, it's not about you being the technician. It's about you eventually stepping into the role of teacher, of instructor. So like if you want to be a professional gamer, go on Twitch and start teaching and doing tutorials, right? That's what we're talking about here. Okay. And then finally, last but not least, relationships. The more you actually get out and be social, because your Saturn and Gemini in the 11th house of friendships and groups and large bodies of people is ruling your seventh house of relationships. It would be very important for you to like meet your ideal partner at festivals or community gatherings, Saturday morning markets, especially markets on Saturdays because Saturn is his day is Saturday, so that would actually be very, very appropriate. Um, oh, and Saturn and Jupiter are actually moving into Aquarius in December, so you're actually about to get some major relationship action for sure around the holidays. Get ready for a date to New Year's and Christmas, girl. Anyway, so that's all I have to say about your chart before I start babbling my freaking head off. Um, okay, let's move on to chart number 2. Okay, so chart number 2 is JR. Good morning, JR. How are you? Cheers. Let's take a peek at your chart. Another Leo ascendant? Really? Okay. Oh, but this one's very different. Oh, but this one's very different, and we have a unique strain of difficulty. Oh, and we have family trauma. Oh, I love it. JR, let's delve in. This chart is juicy. I'm enjoying it already. So we have a Leo ascendant in this chart, which is the exact same ascendant we had in the previous chart, but this Leo ascendant is different. It behaves differently. The sun is also in a water sign, but the water sign is placed in a different house, which brings a different emphasis to the chart. Um, and that flavor is very unique to you, JR. So we have that same Leo energy. We have that same fixed fire. We have that same kind of flair for the dramatic. We have that radiance that Leo tends to bring to the party. But the Lord of your chart, the sun who rules the sign of Leo, is up in the 8th house of death, of taxes, of estates, of business. It's a very business oriented house. Um, and when we look at the sun being in the 8th, that's going to spark a lot of entrepreneurship. That's going to spark a lot of interest in 8th house topics in general, like business, but also the darker and more complicated sides of death, of taxes, and of estates. Now, what I do find rather interesting about your chart, JR, and something that I'm sure you've realized at this point, but maybe have not totally accepted, um, is you do have Mercury in Pisces here as well, and the Sun is in Pisces too in the 8th house. Now, Mercury is the planet of the mind. Um, and Mercury does not necessarily like to be in Pisces because Pisces is the sign that makes things wishy-washy, right? It deludes the boundaries. It starts to make things unclear and it starts to fuse this world and the next. And when we see the planet of the mind in that wishy-washy kind of psychic sign of Pisces, and the sun in Pisces in the 8th house of death, there's a very, very deep connection to mediumship. And the ability to see those that have crossed over and to communicate with them, because your style of communication is very otherworldly, and that probably presented itself very, very early for you. A lot of people, everybody's psychic to a certain degree, right? I'm of the camp, and I've been in the metaphysical community long enough to where when I help people unlock their psychic gifts through their natal chart and one-on-one coaching and things like that, everybody has psychic abilities, but they all are expressed in different ways. And a lot of people will ask me, do you see psychic talents in my chart? And for you specifically, you have the classic markers of psychic talent. Um, and not just any psychic talent, but probably like when you're younger, probably the most visceral type of psychic talent, which is literally being 1 foot in the physical, 1 foot in the non-physical. And that can be rather confusing, rather befuddling to, the average 6-year-old. As those talents continue to develop. And everybody, unless you're born into a family that automatically supports it, and even then, we have the school system to deal with. But at some point in your intuitive development, you likely repressed your gifts, and that's just the cycle. Everybody goes through the pushing away of the talent. But because it's stamped so readily in your natal chart, we need to be able to respect that in a way that lets you understand you cannot run from this. and you cannot ignore it because it's such a big part of who you are as a person. So there's that. We also have a very interesting formation with Venus and Mars. Venus and Mars are conjunct in the ninth house. The ninth house is the house of spirituality as well, which also brings a very spiritual slant to the chart. But Mars in Aries is rather dominant. It is rather controlling. It is rather much about being the leader, right? And we also have poor Venus here, who's in her fall of Aries, the sign that she does not like to be in, being totally dominated by Mars. And I think that this is the counterculture to your naturally sensitive placements, is you have all this water in your chart already. You have all of this kind of hypersensitive nature. And so how do we balance that hypersensitive nature? We balance it with a very aggressive stance on spirituality, a very conqueror stance of spirituality, a very militant view on the study and the progress and the leadership of spiritual development, and a very prove it to me type attitude that comes forward in the ninth house of spirituality, but also of travel, of higher learning, of foreigners, of education. There is a need to seek, a need to grow. And it is a burning need, it is a burning desire because Mars is here. And that can be, fun to say, hey, I'm going to put my sensitivity on the back burner and I'm just going to consume. I'm just going to consume and burn up. And really devour what it means to study a particular type of kind of worldly culture, and the principles associated with that. It is actually what you will be known for, as well. There are several markers in the chart that indicate, very strong spiritual tendencies, and your spouse to also kind of be in that same camp, that same realm. So I think it's a good space for you to kind of stay in and navigate. That ninth house of travel, excuse me, travel, foreigners, higher education, spirituality. Venus is here ruling the 10th house of success from that house, and the North Node is in the 10th, indicating that really growing towards the ninth house's development is going to be a good look on you, for sure. So I enjoy it. I think you're playing a lot in this chart with 8th, 9th, 10th. Even the 11th, your moon in Gemini, which gives you that really, really nice social grace. I love a good moon in Gemini in the 11th, because it really brings forward a lot of the chameleon energy, that charisma that you can't buy. It's ingrained in the spirit. Somebody who's naturally very social. And part of it is because it's just so interesting to walk around a party and pop in and out of people's heads. Trust me, I know. But that moon in Gemini is, again, being ruled by Mercury and Pisces in the 8th. So again, we go back to the 8th. So it's very 8th, 9th, 10th chart focus for sure. Let's see. But yeah, now we need to talk about the family drama and trauma. Working in the family business, that's fine. Working in real estate, potentially, that's fine. But we really do have retrograde Pluto here. We have Saturn in Pluto, or retrograde Pluto in Scorpio. We have Saturn in Scorpio. We have South Node in Scorpio in the 4th house. There's a lot of heaviness and karmic debt in the family dynamic that does need to be addressed, that does need to be kind of worked with. So if there was an area of your chart, besides, acknowledging and developing your own spiritual and intuitive gifts, I would highly recommend that you do some ancestor medicine and that you work with healing the bloodline, healing the lineage, because that's going to be something that just makes your life easier as a whole. It's going to lift some weight off of your chart that's going to allow you to expand in ways that you wouldn't be able to otherwise, because you would have this kind of anchor in the chart weighing you down. Cool. Good markers for children. They'll definitely be spasmodic. Uranus and Sagittarius in the 5th house, those are going to be some crazy ass kids. Some crazy ass kids. But I love to see, you know, Jupiter in partial mutual reception with Uranus between the 7th and 5th houses. That's just going to be great, great family chemistry. Okay, I think that's pretty. Oh, and finances, just as an FYI, money's not going to be the clearest thing for you. So I would definitely recommend if there was another thing I would recommend just based on your natal chart financially, have somebody else look at your taxes. Don't try to master finance this go around. It's just anytime that you try to touch your own money, that Mercury in Pisces in the sign of his detriment is going to be tapped and activated. So you're going to try to intuitively navigate finances. And although you may be financially intuitively gifted, I would always have somebody else look at it because Mercury in Pisces doesn't know when it's confused. And that's the tricky part of that placement. Great for intuitive work, not so great for logical things like finance. Okay, and we're moving on to Paul. Okay, good morning, Paul. How are you? Cheers. Let's take a peek at Paul's chart. Such a sensitive moon in Pisces. Neptune in the 1st house, too. A double Neptune Pisces energy. Strong Jupiter in the 11th. So social. So social. Oh, but Sun and Cap in the 12th. Saturn Leo ruling the chart. Okay. Okay, we can work with that. So, Paul, let's chat. Let's chat, shall we? So having an Aquarius ascendant is really interesting. Aquarius is the sign of the genius, but is a little bit socially challenged. But you've definitely made up for that in the chart, so I'm thrilled to see that. But I think what we need to understand about your chart is not necessarily your Aquarius ascendant, but your Saturn in Leo retrograde in the 7th. You're going to have this visceral need to be in a relationship, to weigh you down, to make you feel like you are stable, to make you feel like you are grounded, to make you feel like you are completing yourself, and that is dangerous. That is very dangerous, because when we look at, you know, health and psychology specifically, the idea that you need to feel complete with another person in your life is a toxic pattern. Yeah. It's not to say that relationships aren't good and that they aren't grounding and that they aren't healthy for, you know, well-rounded development, because they are. Yeah. But when we look at astrologically the ruler of the chart being in the 7th house of relationships, this puts a rather unhealthy slant on the need to have somebody in your life to complete you. And I'm here as an astrologer to tell you that you are already complete, you are already beautiful, you are already perfect, just the way you are, and you do not need somebody else to save you. And unfortunately, that's kind of the big first challenge of the chart, especially earlier in life, because Saturn is not just ruling the 1st house of self from the 7th house of relationships. Saturn is also ruling the 12th house, where your Sun and your Venus are. We've already talked about the Sun being in the 12th in our first chart, and when we see the Sun in the 12th, especially in the cold sign of Sagittarius or of Capricorn, you know, when the Sun is in Capricorn, it's literally winter. Yeah, so it's the darkest time for the Sun at that point. It's a very cold Sun. And then to put the Sun in the house of shadow, the house of hidden enemies, the house of deep healing. Yeah. it really extinguishes the sun's light and it makes the self-confidence rather low. I would highly suggest some solar remediation for you. Um, the need to bring in some of that solar light, the need to make an altar for the sun, to worship the idea of self-radiance and you being enough and you bringing in that kind of golden solar light into your life, and reminding yourself that you are the center of your own universe, and you are not, it may feel like you need to orbit around other people, but you are the master of your own domain. You are the master of your own experience at the end of the day, even though it's a tough experience, even though life is not necessarily kind or warm or gentle like the sun. That is what forces you to develop your own radiance. Yeah, it's that seed that's kind of buried underneath the soil, which then has to reach for the sun's light through the darkness. And that's kind of the emergence of your chart as we unpack the first kind of 15, 16 years of life, is just you understanding, that need to reach is you're actually reaching for you. Yeah, you're reaching to find the pieces of you, so that life can no longer be so dark. Yeah, but that can also be dangerous because you're reaching for anything. Yeah, anything and everything that feels warm to you, the nearest warm body. Yeah, and as you grow and as you mature, we just need you to be a little bit more picky. Yeah, and the best light, the best confidence, the best esteem comes from the self, comes from within, and cannot be bought by other people, bought or brought in by other people. Now, let's talk about your charisma. Let's talk about your social ability, because this is the strength of your chart. And let me tell you this. So, when you're alone, you feel so small and you feel so withered and you feel so alone. Then, when you throw yourself in front of a group of people, you transform into this other person. You transform into this ball of life and fire and charisma. And that's Jupiter in Sagittarius. That's Mercury in Sagittarius. That's Mars in Sagittarius up in the 11th house of friendships and social groups. I would highly encourage you to be involved in drama club. I would highly encourage you to be involved in community theater, because what that's going to do is it's going to pull out your fire, it's going to pull out your light, it's going to pull out your confidence, and it's going to teach you how to embody those traits on a more regular basis in a healthy way, because it's going to remind you that you do have those qualities, and by doing them in front of large groups, and allowing that heat to take over, that second personality to take over, that jovial personality to take over, you're then going to learn how to channel that into those socially isolated moments where you feel low, and you're going to be able to put on that second persona more and more easily as you mature and grow and develop. So that's the easiest part of your chart, is the sociability. Anytime that you get a chance, and throughout the life as well, anytime that you get a chance to do community development, any chance that you get to be involved in philanthropic efforts, any chance that you have to give back to charity, any chance that you have to work with community organizations, I would highly, highly suggest that you do so, because that's going to activate your Jupiter. It's going to be great for your financial house, and it's just going to bring a lot of wealth and abundance, and the easier aspects of the chart start to come forward the more you're surrounded by large groups of people, because they see the light in you that you don't, right? So that's the catch. Moon in Pisces in the second, you really are here to master finance to a certain degree. But then also we need to understand that your emotional health is also connected to your financial wealth. And your self-esteem in general. Moon in Pisces in the second is also about mastering, again, self-esteem. But when we look at the moon in Pisces in the second with money stuff, the idea of how much money you have or don't have impacting your emotional wellness is also part of that picture. You'll also potentially work in the financial fields, because that moon in Pisces, ruled by Jupiter in the 11th, is ruling your 6th house of work. So yeah, I think to just summarize your chart as a whole, you know, earlier in life, it's a self-esteem game for you. And understanding your own personal power, making sure that you don't feel too socially isolated, but that you also don't look to other people to establish your own sense of self-worth and self-value, because that's dangerous. Very, very unhealthy habit to develop. But then as you start to work with large groups, as you start to work with drama, as you start to work on the stage, as you start to throw yourself into community involvement, that brings ease into the chart. So the more you can be public, the more you'll find your sense of self returned, your ego inflated, and you start to really reap the benefits of your chart the more social you are. Excellent. Thank you, Paul, for donating your chart to the live stream. Okay. Seems to be rather low on comments today. I wonder why. Everybody's at work, probably. Okay, Tammy. Let's take a peek at Tammy's chart. Nice Scorpio ascending. Mars and Aries, 6th house, ruling the chart. That's very similar to my chart. Jupiter in Sagittarius in the second. What? What is this nonsense? Absolute nonsense. With Venus exalted in Pisces in the 5th? Blessed is this chart, for she is glorious and abundant. Oh my God, I love it. I absolutely adore it, Tammy. I'm a super fan. So having a Scorpio ascendant does give you that blessing of the underworld. It's a one-way, well, not really one way, because that's morbid. It's a two-way ticket to the underworld, right? The idea of Scorpio being all things hidden, all things secretive. But the reason why Scorpio is hidden and secretive is because it's so sensitive, and it needs to defend and protect and shroud and shadow those vulnerable bits that are not for at everyday consumption by mortals, right? Having Scorpio on the ascendant naturally gives you the piercing gaze of Scorpio, makes people very uncomfortable when you stare at them, because you're literally peering into their soul. But it's just a very sensitive placement to put on the first house. Now that does mean Mars is the ruler of your chart, and Mars is in his proper sign of Aries in the 6th house of work. As somebody who has both Scorpio on the ascendant and Mars and Aries in the 6th, let me give you a little bit of a rundown of the chaos of this. It's not always chaotic all the time, but there are rules that I have learned with these placements that I think you will find rather valuable. Mars in Aries on a good day is a take no prisoners, burn down the village, must move forward, must conquer, must succeed type of placement. Mars in Aries in the 6th house of work means that we tend to be workaholics. We tend to not know when to shut off. We tend to want to lead to a fault. Yeah. And especially when we have Scorpio on the ascendant being ruled by that Mars, the reason why we're so addicted to moving forward is because when we don't move forward and we're forced to stop, we actually have to look at everything that's festering underneath the surface. So there's that. Yeah. But putting the Lord of your chart in the 6th, we do need to be aware that forward movement is not always right. It's not always correct. It's not always necessary. You taking the lead, you taking the charge, you being the best, not always correct, not always necessary. You doing your best. Like, one of the things with when we see a planet in its home sign, it's essential dignity, right? Um, there's an astrological blessing that is transferred here, and especially when it involves the 6th house of work, we need to understand that, like, your idea of the best that you can do is still miles ahead of what everybody else's best consists of. So even when you're relaxing, you're going to be 10 times more productive than those around you. My friends joke when they send me text messages throughout the day, or like first thing in the morning, they'll just randomly say, "Hey, good morning. I know you've already been, you've already done the work of 3 days by now, because I'm up first thing, writing my posts, doing my dailies, sending off emails, scheduling clients. Like, it's an overproductivity that Mars will bring into the first house via Aries. So there's that. Also, Venus in Pisces in the 5th house, goddess of love and abundance, in her exaltation in Pisces, in the 5th house of creativity, sexuality, children, and parenting. Like, brava. Absolute brava. You have both benefics in their proper sign, Venus in her exaltation, in the 5th house of children and parenting, and then Jupiter in Sagittarius in the 2nd house of wealth, ruling that Venus. Graced are your 2nd house of finance and your 5th house of children. I am extremely pleased with these placements. And you have a very, very good chance of being creative, and earning a large amount of money from your creative endeavors. I would highly suggest, if you don't already have an Etsy shop, start an Etsy shop. If you don't already work in art or fashion, I would highly recommend you work in art or fashion. Your style, your perception of value, is superb and blessed by the grace of the planets. In the 3rd house of writing, teaching, communication, we have your Sun in Capricorn, your Mercury in Capricorn. This is where you get your stubbornness. This is where you get, Scorpio imbues you with a certain level of fierceness, especially with that Mars and Aries ruling. But Capricorn comes through and gives you the ability to say no, specifically, to others, and sometimes to yourself. It does bring a level of strictness. It does bring a level of closeness to the mind, level of hyper focus. Strong cardinal placements in any chart will bring out leadership qualities, but here again, you have good teaching skills, you have good speaking skills, you're very concise to the point. It does take a little bit of poking and prodding to get you to explain yourself, but the idea of you having an opinion, like, you have opinions, and those opinions are very valuable. I just think that, the blunt edge of those opinions might be a little bit harsh for people at times, but those will round out as you grow and mature. North Node in Aquarius and Moon in Aquarius in the 4th house. Home is really where the heart is for you. You having a home of your own, but also a home that you can come into and feel emotionally safe. Very, very important. You're also here to develop a family. You're also here to develop a sense of family. That doesn't necessarily need to be a biological family. It does need to be, well, in fact, it does need to be a biological family, because you have Saturn in the 7th house ruling the 4th house of family. So I take that back. It does need to be a biological family. You kind of rewriting the code of your family dynamic is going to be very important to you this go around. You are attracted to the rock. not The Rock like Dwayne Johnson, but the idea of Saturn in Taurus retrograde in your seventh house of relationships. That's the heaviest placement we could possibly manifest in a chart. And you've decided to put that smack dab in the relationship house, ruling the fourth house of family. Like, you're looking for somebody that you can tie yourself to, who's not going to move, who's not going to change, who's going to be the most predictable person in the world, so that you can build your life around them. Solid strategy. Solid strategy. You know, as you do your creative stuff, as you exercise all of these placements, it's just really important to have, you know, to build your life on the back of somebody who's going to be stable, who's going to be grounded, and who's going to keep you grounded. And I think that that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Excellent. Cool. Thank you, Tammy. Always nice to see an exalted chart. I do enjoy these charts very, very much. And then we've got one more chart. Let's pull up Chelsea's chart. Okay, Chelsea. Good morning. How are you? Ooh. Interesting. Interesting, interesting. Chelsea, my dear. How fascinating. Fascinating. I love looking at family charts because I can clearly see every single time where the parent has passed on their planetary traits. And in this case, looking at this mother-daughter chart, the idea of the previous chart's exaltations, yeah, being passed down to Chelsea is so evident in the chart. First, she has Mercury in Gemini, yeah. Although it is retrograde, Mercury is still in Gemini and ruling the sun in the second house of wealth, which is flawless. Then we have Venus in Cancer, about to conjoin Jupiter in Cancer, who is exalted, which, again, both benefics conjoining with Jupiter being exalted, flawless, and the moon ruling that conjunction from the 11th house of friendships. Like, that's just a beautiful placement. So I'm a fan. Let's see. And moon and Jupiter in mutual reception. Just why not? Why not? Okay. Enough Googling or ogling. Let's read into the chart. So we have a Taurus ascendant. This is going to bring that fixed earth energy into the chart, which is going to bring a very homey vibe. Taurus on the ascendant I enjoy because it's the type of person that you just feel comfortable around. It's the type of person where you're just like, you know, I'm just gonna stand next to you and chill for a little bit because I feel safe. Taurus, when placements are high in a chart in Taurus, you know, these are people that just radiate normal, and radiate comfort and radiate safety, and they're often very compassionate, and they just want everybody to feel okay. And I like that. And then to have the ruler of your chart being Venus about to conjoin Jupiter, like, that's a very blessed ruler that you've chosen. Venus in Cancer is the Octomom archetype. You know, she is the mother who has 8 arms, who's constantly taking care of others. Especially in the third house of teaching, it would not surprise me if you've wanted to be a teacher ever since you were little. Also, this is the third house of writing and creativity. Excuse me, writing, teaching, speaking. Um, so I would highly suggest creative writing as not just an outlet, but as something that you do on a regular basis. Poetry would be excellent for you. Um, what was I going to say with that? Yeah, I mean, you're so blessed in the third house with Jupiter's exalted state in Cancer. I literally just cannot even. And then to have your moon in Pisces in the 11th, you just being so sensitive, so intuitive, so in tune to large groups of people, like you'd be a natural public speaker, especially on topics of motherhood and intimacy and vulnerability and all the things that Cancer naturally rules. You'd just be so good at those things. You'd be excellent in philanthropy. You do very well in drama and any type of performance arts. You do very well on social media, which is also something ruled by the 11th house. Um, but again, in a writing, teaching, speaking role. Um, somebody who takes a step up, and with your Taurus placements and your Jupiter and your moon, like you're such a non-threatening, compassionate presence. And you can use that to your advantage, but you would never use that to your advantage, and that's why people trust you. Yeah, because you literally you ooze compassion, and that's what the world needs to see more of. And I would really like you to step up to the plate in that department, and to have yourself be known for those traits and those qualities, and to share what you have to say with others, because it's beautiful, it's glorious. Having Mercury retrograde in the chart is a little bit tricky. It does mean that your communication style is slightly backwards, although Mercury is in his own sign, so it's a little bit better. You can just speak forwards and backwards, but you have a tendency to enjoy speaking backwards, or your words may be prone to mistranslation at first. So slow down. Yeah. Write things out ahead of time. Script them out ahead of time before you write an email. Let somebody else read it. Spell check software, grammar software. I would highly suggest you have it, just because this Mercury retrograde in your chart does require just a little bit more aid, especially in the second house of finance. We wouldn't want any typos. We wouldn't want anything being said that is not meant. The sun is also here. North Node is here. Saturn is here. There's a lot of financial activity in the chart. I like it. Mercury is known for the three M's: magic, medicine, and money. And so to have Mercury, a very monetarily savvy planet, in his own sign, ruling both the Sun and Saturn, bringing importance, but also that restrictive business type principle, and the North Node, the personal compass of your chart. I really just enjoy the emphasis that you've decided to put on earning, in this lifetime. So you've got your soft side, but then you've also got your really strong business side. And with that exalted Jupiter ruling your eighth house of business, really nice entrepreneurial energy, really strong business ties and money ties in general. I like your financial house. I really do. I think it's fun. Yeah, writing, teaching, speaking. Again, this is what I love about charts where there's already a strong theme. There are just a couple really powerful clusters. We don't really need to go anywhere else in the chart because the themes keep repeating. We do have Scorpio on the seventh house, which brings us back again to the third house via that Mars in Cancer. One of the things about your relationships is you're going to be attracted to somebody who's naturally as sensitive as you are. And one of the things that might be a little bit of a hesitation is you kind of want somebody who's willing to take charge every now and again. Unfortunately, when somebody is sensitive to the degree that you want them to be sensitive, there's also a lack of taking charge that will come forward as well. So you want to find somebody with an equal blend of water and fire placements in their chart. Fire because you want them to be active, you want them to take charge, you want them to have passion and drive. But water because you also want them to be sensitive. So it's a unique blend that you're looking for specifically in the chart. That Mars in Cancer in the third, ruling your seventh house of relationships, means that you will also probably fall in love or find somebody who's in the same profession as you, that writing, teaching, speaking profession, and partner with them. But again, because you're so similar, you might be too similar in certain ways. So we want somebody who has a little bit more heat than you, somebody who has a little bit more of that leadership quality, but who also respects and understands and knows and has your sensitive side top of mind and top of chart as well. Excellent. Thank you, Chelsea. I appreciate you donating your chart to the live streams. Cool. And that is it. We are up for our time today. Thank you, everybody who jumped on sporadically throughout the live stream. I saw people kind of jumping on. And for those of you watching the recording on YouTube, just as a reminder, if you would like to be on the live streams, you can always submit your chart to the list. The list is rather long, so please be patient. But all I need is your birthplace, your birth date, and your exact birth time. I do need an exact birth time in order for the chart to be accurate. Just private message me those details. Never post those details publicly for privacy's sake. And I will add you to the list and message you when your chart is featured. If you would like to work one-on-one or learn astrology, you can always go to my website, scorpiorisingastrology.com, where you'll see my consultations page, and you can submit a consultation request and the online classes that are available there. I also have a new online class coming up, which will be live on October 25th, or the recording will be available on my website if you're seeing this late, on planetary altars and how to remediate a chart through partnering with the planets. So that's coming up in a couple weeks. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Until Wednesday, when we do this again, may the stars be ever in your favor.